All right, Matt Easton recently made a video about the murder stroke, or Mordhau, or Mordschlag, as it's called in German, and basically doubting just how usable it really is, even with a glove. So if you don't know what that is, it's this crazy thing where you grip the sword by the blade and strike with it. Why would you ever do that? Against armor. So I don't have a helmet right now that I'm willing to destroy, but fortunately Rick has improvised something, and good old Bob is helping out. Yeah, he looks like a real dork, doesn't he? It's even worse. We can give him a mohawk or something. Anyway, this is not about these. This is just to have something to smack. And that's what I want to try out, because the question is, can you actually do this without getting injured? I've demonstrated this before, way back in 2014, I think, just showing that you can indeed handle a sword by the blade. And depending on how you do it, like if you do it with a pinch grip like this, I'm basically keeping the edges away from my hands, like that. So they are not technically touching, and so this way I can smack him, but the grip just isn't as strong. The manuscripts show wrapping the fingers all the way around and hitting like that. Can you do that? Well, we'll see. First off, I should show you my hands as they are right now. So I already have a blood blister from earlier testing. I'll give it my best shot, I guess. Ow. Oh, this is not designed for two-handed use. Oh. And there's like a very minor scratch right here. But otherwise, you know, my hands are okay right now. We'll hope it stays like that. By the way, don't do this at home. There's a first aid kit here just in case. Don't do this at home. I'm a professional idiot. So here's something to keep in mind. Because this is a technique to be used against armor, because, you know, if this was a proper helmet and I've just wanted to cut him, it's not really gonna cut it, pun intended. So we need something a little bit different. One way to deal with it, by the way, ignore how short he is. He lost his legs in a war, you know how it is. So one way to do it is thrusting into the gaps of the armor. So, you know, the neck, armpits, things like this. You can't have rigid plate there because otherwise you wouldn't be able to move. So what you can do is what's called half sorting, where you grab the blade like this, and that's just to get more control over where the point goes. So you can drive it in like that. And so the other option from here is to just strike with the guard, with the pommel or the guard, and use it like a bludgeon, basically, because now you're reversing the balance. Now you've got most of the mass at the end, which means it's going to hit harder, etc. Okay, so much for the theory. And if both are in armor, then of course you have some hand protection. It's going to be limited, because on the inside of a gauntlet you can only have leather. You can't have rigid plates on the inside. What you can have is something like a mail glove. This is a modern take on it, cut-resistant glove. So it's just interwoven rings, and of course, this is not a problem at all. Like, you're not going to get cut. The drawback of that is metal on metal doesn't have as much traction, so this might slide around, so you don't have as good of a grip as you do with bare hands, and especially with leather gloves. So leather gloves is what we should really assume here, but I'm gonna try it with bare hands and kind of slowly work my way up to see basically what am I comfortable with, really. So, oh yeah, sharpness test, because otherwise people are gonna be like, that's dull, it's not even a scam, you know how it is. I don't even know how sharp this one is right now. Okay, yeah. I've done test cutting with it. It's sharp. It's not like hair popping sharp, blah, 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 all of this, but absolutely sharp enough to be fully functional. Okay, so This one is actually really hard to do with a pinch grip because there's so little blade, it's so narrow that I'm like, not great. Yeah, I'm not really comfortable swinging much harder than this. I gotta tell you that. Because even though just holding onto it and moving it around is fine as long as I don't allow it to slide in my hand, as soon as I hit something, you know, and it vibrates, it bounces around. In fact, harmless compared to what can happen to you in a sword fight. So it's just superficial cuts, but you're not invulnerable. Several people have demonstrated handling sharp blades like this. I've done it too in the past, and yeah, this is all fine and good. You can absolutely do this and all, but it's not the same as actually hitting something hard. All right, so not to sugarcoat anything, I did draw blood, as you can see. It's blood, so it's always going to look way worse because it's runny, but it's not deep. I'm not running risk of any kind of structural damage. Like I can still move my hand perfectly normally, and this is gonna stop bleeding in like 2 minutes. And this is my hand the next day. As you can see, minor superficial cuts, doesn't bother me at all. Didn't even hurt at the time. And with particularly thick calluses, you probably wouldn't even get this much. However, depending on the sharpness of the edge, the shape of the blade, and the type of target, there is some potential for serious injury here. Without gloves, that is. We'll see how much of a difference that makes just a bit later in the video. So what's the difference compared to the demonstration I did in 2014? Well, for one, this blade is sharper, it's narrower, and it makes quite a difference how much give the target has that you're hitting. Something that's kind of squishy you can hit way harder, while a hard target like steel makes the blow bounce back more, and it makes the sword vibrate much harder. This one here seems a bit better. It's also not as sharp. So on this I can do the pinch grip. Again, it's not super hard by any means. It's kind of like, this is, I don't know, 40%, maybe? Yeah, I'm not terribly comfortable striking him super hard, let alone with the hands wrapped around it. Would I want to do this like full force? Hitting this guy in the helmet full force with bare hands? Hell no, not really. So, let's try gloves. These gloves here, they're padded, but only on top. On the inside, this is just a single layer of leather. So they may look protective, but it's really just like, on the inside it's just like a regular leather glove. It's nothing crazy. So a duelist would wear something like this. All right, no big deal. I can tell you immediately, feels so much safer. Not just because the edge isn't digging into my skin, but also because it feels stickier. Like the leather actually sticks to the steel. So it's quite a bit harder. Didn't feel it. There are no cuts in the glove. I don't really want to hit it any harder because this is going to get all scratched up and everything, but let me just get the beater sword. You can hit either with the guard or the pommel. I like the pommel, not only because it's at the end of a longer lever, but also because you can bend the guard. The pommel is a little more robust. So this, I can hit him pretty hard, and nothing. I could hit him pretty hard if the sword was built a little bit more robust. It has bend, but at least it's still holding together. That's another potential problem with this. You can absolutely bend the sword. Curved blades, I would say, are worse for this, depending on how strongly this is not very strongly curved, so this is not really a problem. The good thing is I can actually turn it around and hit like this or like this. That should be the better option, because then it's impacting with the spine against my hand and fingers. So that should be better. I'm a bit hesitant to do this because this is an expensive sword, but hey, it's an Albion and I trust Albion. Screw it. This is also wide enough that I can do the pinch grip pretty well. It is actually denting it. I think even if you don't dent it or even penetrate the helmet, this is going to suck. It's going to potentially cause concussion and whiplash and who knows what, various neck injuries. One thing that people have pointed out or asked about is just like, yeah, but can the enemy not just grab the hilt? Because you're kind of handing it to them, right? Well, you're not staying in a forward guard like this. You're not going to be assuming this kind of guard except like that. That would be really dumb. You're going to keep it back, and then only at that moment is somebody going to try to catch this on their... I don't think so. This would be pretty freaking... This would be likely to break the forearm and whatnot, so you wouldn't actually do that. So this is not going to be a tug of war or anything. I definitely wouldn't advise doing this, but you can absolutely do that. With the gloves, I can tell you that what holds me back and hitting hard is just that I don't want to damage my sword rather than my hands. I'm not worried about my hands at all right now. And this is simple leather gloves, just nothing going on here. So I have something from earlier where I was handling it without gloves, and that makes quite a difference. Makes a dramatic difference. And again, these are just very simple gloves. So if you're actually fighting in full armor with a gauntlet, even if it's just leather on the inside, it's fine. It's no problem at all. You've got the traction, you've got a certain amount of protection, it's not going to slip around. So I would say whenever we see depictions of somebody, of an unarmored fighter versus somebody in full armor, some people have argued that this is just an omission, that the other guy is supposed to be in full armor too. That could be. It could also just be, it's an emergency situation. You know, like if you get attacked by somebody in full armor and you don't have armor, it's not very likely for the most part, but if that were to happen, you would definitely accept getting your hand cut and have a better chance of fighting, actually. But otherwise, definitely, I would not say using that with bare hands is a good idea. Possible, but not a good idea. Also, we shouldn't forget that when even just superficial cuts bleed quite a lot, your hands get slippery, you can't hold onto the blade as well anymore. It's not good. And interestingly, there are specialized designs for this in some of the historical manuscripts. There are even swords with spiked guards and pommels. And clearly at least some of them were not supposed to be sharpened all the way. The Italian knight and fencing master Fiore de Liberi mentions such a design, and even though he's not showing the murder stroke as such, it would work quite well for this, because he says that the edge should only be sharp about a hand width down from the point on the first version. The second version is sharpened along the blade, except one unsharpened section which can be held. He says the hilt needs to be strongly made, and it's heavier than usual longswords. So this indicates that a specialized sword for fighting in armor would be stouter and more durable. I'm not aware of any such swords actually surviving as archaeological finds or in museums. And it's important to keep in mind that the mortar stroke appears mostly, if not exclusively, in manuscripts dealing with judicial dueling, which is a very different beast from fighting on the battlefield or even in self-defense on the street. So there is reasonable doubt about how much this was actually done. There's one other way in which you could make this work, potentially, which is if you have some kind of quick attachment loop that goes over the guard, for example, and you keep the sword in a scabbard and then you strike with it. Because you can hold on to the scabbard and hit with that, no problem. So that would be worth considering. But again, you would have to strap it down somehow. You would have to secure it. Otherwise, obviously, as soon as you swing it, this is going to come out. So there's that. The other question is, how effectively can you hit with something, considering that depending on the sword, the blade might be quite flexible. This is pretty wobbly. That's basically the same as when you're cutting with a sword, edge alignment. Like if you're on, then it's not really going to affect that. If it's kind of off, then yes, this might happen. Technically, for your hands, it would be safer to smack them like this with the flat, which is just not going to be as effective. Good thing is that you're not going to take the impact on your hand, with the edge against your flesh, the same way. So depending on the sword, you could probably do this. I don't think so personally, but you could. It would be an option, and it might be safer potentially, somewhat less effective, but it might be an option. And the final point is the question of how quickly can you do that? How quickly can you change in a fight? And that really depends on what you're doing. Like if you have a conventional guard at the time, then yeah, this, 1, 2, 3, that's a bit awkward. If you're already half swording because you're fighting someone in armor, now it's just this, right? So that's not as much of a problem. You can easily do this. You can also just do this. And that's what Fiore likes, cracking them in the face with a guard or pommel in a straightforward way, when he's not lifting the dude's visor to nonchalantly stab him in the face, that is. That's about all I've got, so hope you found it interesting. Again, don't do this, okay? Don't do this at home. It's not a smart idea. You know what is a good idea, though? Joining the battle against a vicious beast known as YouTubus algorithmus. And checking out some nifty merch. Just saying. I hope you found this interesting, and thanks for watching.